Good evening, Wareham, and welcome to the October 10th Select Board meeting. I'm going to do a roll call and then I'm going to ask for a motion for a clerk pro tem. Present is Ms. Wertz, myself, Whiteside, Mr. Slavin, Mr. Bessie, Mr. Sullivan, and Mr. Bowen. Absent is Mr. Chadwick. May I have a motion, please, for a clerk pro tem?
Motion so made.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Well, who's it going to be?
You asked for that. Motion for Tricia Wertz to be clerk for the day.
Thank you. Is
And
that your second?
And that is my second.
Thank you. Motion made and seconded to have Ms. Wertz serve as the clerk pro tem. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin.
Yes.
Mr. Bessie.
Yes.
Ms. Wertz.
Yes.
Myself, yes, it is so. The Pledge of Allegiance is going to be led by Frank Heath, who is a previous resident of the town of Wareham, previous chair of the Finance Committee. Mr. Heath, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes.
Move the shirt over there.
Move the chair up. There we go. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for
which stands one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, residents' comments. Comments on non-agenda items shall be limited to 2 minutes, and there will be no more than 10 minutes per meeting. Based on past practice, the select board members will not respond or comment. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak to this board on a non-agenda item? Please raise your hand. Susan Noonan.
It's actually.
Would you let Miss Noonan in, please? No, thank you. Miss Noonan, would you identify yourself, please, for the record?
Yes, this is Susan Noonan. I live at 46 West Boulevard in Onset.
And
Sorry about the video. I was on my way to the actual town hall and had to turn around. Wasn't aware it was a remote meeting, so I do apologize.
you choose to address this board
Yes, I do choose to address the board.
on what item, please?
It's a non-agenda item, but it is concerning the motels that are housing the unsheltered migrants.
You have 2 minutes to speak. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. To the select board, guests, members of the community, and the press, thank you for your attention to my concerns this evening. Wareham Week, our newspaper, is my source for information regarding the housing of unsheltered families in Wareham. After reading the articles in the last 3 editions, I have questions about the situations at the specific hotels, as well as the implications of this matter for the community as a whole. First, the lack of a sprinkler system at the Atlantic Motel has been brought up in 2 articles. How is this the case in a facility that is monitored, regulated, and required to have permits in place? These families must be preparing food in some manner within the small rooms. Also, how are families laundering both their clothing and bedding? Do the motels have processes in place to control and monitor trash disposal? The Atlantic Motel was, quote, previously rejected as housing veterans, end quote. Why is that? Second, there has been mention of a letter being written to the state. Has this been
1 minute
done?
warning, Miss Noonan.
If not, when is that likely to be composed, approved, and sent? Will a copy be made available to the public? What are the specific asks of the select board to federal and state entities? And finally, thank you to Turning Point and Damien's Pantry for continuing to assist these families who have come to seek a better life. Scott Palladino, his faculty and staff should also be applauded for their transparency in sharing the current academic experience at the high school.
Thank you, Ms. Noonan, and have a nice evening. We will
You're
not
welcome.
comment on your comments, but we have heard them. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. You have a delightful night.
You as well. Is there anyone else who chooses to address this board on a non-agenda item? Please raise your hand. I see none. Noah, would you take Ms. Noonan out? Thank you. I'm going to ask Ms. Wertz to, well, we'll go to announcements. Let's go to announcements. Mr. Slavin.
No,
Mr. Bessie.
Nothing tonight.
Ms. Wertz.
Yeah, I would just like to thank Turning Point and all the people who are working with them to assist our visitors. One of the things that we do want to make sure is a lot of people have been bringing their extra clothes and other things to Turning Point, and at this point, they do not need them. We have the issues addressed, but thank you all for your interest and your support.
Thank you. I have no announcements. Ms. Wertz, I'll accept a motion on item 6A, the Conservation Commission.
Make a motion that we reappoint or appoint Denise Schultz or accept her step down from a member position to an associate member position with a term to expire June 30th, 2024.
She did, for the record. May I have a second?
second,
Motion made and seconded. She did submit a letter of resignation from the full-time position, so this motion is proper. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin,
yes,
Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Mrs. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself, yes, it is so. Ms. Wertz, next.
and I make a motion to appoint Paula Jean O'Neill, who has been in an associate position at the Conservation Commission, to a full member position for a term to expire June 30th, 2024.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint Paula Jean O'Neill as a full member of the Conservation Commission. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin,
yes,
Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself, yes. We will now go to item 9C, Ms. Wertz, donation, please.
I make a motion for a vote to accept $150 donation from Richard Paulus to the Wareham Free Library gift account.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to accept the $150 donation to the Wareham Free Library gift account. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin,
yes,
Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself, yes, it is so. 9B, Ms. Wertz, please.
okay. I make a motion to open a discussion and take a vote to prorate fees for Bebo's Sports Grill.
Is there a second to that motion?
second,
Second.
Made and seconded. For the record, previously, when businesses have opened with less than half a year to go, we have prorated the full term fee. The owner of this location has indicated that he will be opening in late October. Previously, we have granted 50% discounts on people who have less than 5 months to go. So I leave it up to you.
And what fees would we be prorating, just to be specific?
Just the liquor license fee.
What would the 50% be?
I knew you were gonna ask that. And I don't know. It's like $700, roughly.
So I mean, so he's gonna pay a half fee for roughly 2 months
Correct.
of, okay. I
Or
mean,
you
I
would-
don't,
Or you
Were we
could go
going to do
to,
a quarter fee? Can we do a quarter fee for him
Yeah.
for two months?
you can.
do whatever you want.
I make a motion that we move his fee for the 2 months he's open to quarter of the normal fee for a liquor license.
Second,
It
That'll
would
be the-
be the all alcohol common vic. Is there a second to that motion?
that was a second for the yearly license.
to be prorated to a 1/4 of, okay, thank you.
Yep.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I'll go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin,
Yes,
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
Mr. Bessie,
Yes,
and myself, yes, it is so. We have 2 7:15 hearings. We will be going into executive session at the end of this meeting. We will be adjourned from that. We will not be returning to open session, just so that everyone knows. Let's go to liaison and initiative reports. Mr. Bessie,
nothing tonight.
okay. Mr. Slavin,
that was a quiet week.
Ms. Wertz,
also quiet. I've been sticking my nose in some meetings, but none that I'm liaison to.
okay. This is not really a liaison report, but I have to caution people on 2 things. We have another dog hearing coming up in another 3 weeks. That will be 4 for the year so far. There are very definitive rules and regulations about licensing your dogs in this town. The case that's coming up, you will be getting the documentation. I think you already got a copy of the letter. Dogs in this town are required to be licensed as long as they're over 6 months old. The other thing I would say is when there's small craft warnings out on Buzzards Bay, you might want to heed those small craft warnings. We had 2 vessels, one out of the port of Dartmouth, Mass, where 2 people flipped a boat a couple of times. They were in the water. One of them was in the water for 45 minutes. The second was a vessel that came ashore on Little Harbor Beach. Apparently the anchor dragged. That boat was removed today. And then there was another, it was either a kayak or a sailfish. Somebody was out in more than 20-mile-an-hour winds and the sailfish on Sunday. Then I hope they have really good life insurance is what I would say. Not really helpful. Not only does it put you at risk, it puts our first responders at risk. There were several first responders that reported to the Dartmouth incident and the kayak sailfish incident. It's just really not reasonable. Okay. Mr. Sullivan,
Thanks.
do you have a quick report
9C.
for like 3 minutes? 2 minutes? Or do you want? Because I have to wait to 7:15.
Yes, when I'm giving you that signal, it means I'm on 3 other screens on my laptop.
Okay,
Trying to get back to you.
okay.
Yeah, I just want to say Thursday was a really, it was a pleasant day, a little bit of a sad day. Mr. Campina officially retired from his duties as the Water Pollution Control Facility Director. You know, we were able to put together a nice event for him. I thank all of you that attended, and it was fantastic. So I really appreciate all his help. We know he'll be around to still help out when we need him in the calls. And had a long meeting with his I guess you'd say the person filling his shoes today with the assistant town administrator and myself, and we're really excited about the future of the plant as well. So I know Mr. Campina wholeheartedly endorsed the new sewer director, so I think it'll work out really well. Oh geez, you've got me all messed up here doing this is a little early, but
Well, you can hang on because I can talk to Miss Wertz for 1 minute while we wait for 7:15 if you want.
Now you know what it's like to be the clerk.
I would like to say one other thing on over the weekend we received notification that and I don't want to bag the groom, but a groom whose duty may have been to pick up the marriage certificate failed to do so for a wedding that was occurring. So I was able to reach out to the town clerk with the Miss Grandma there, Deb, and she drove in specifically to come open up the vault to where they were all locked in to make sure that wedding happened. And I just want to thank her wholeheartedly for, here she is, new to the town and going above and beyond. So what an awesome thing that was. And I received a picture of the bride and her father, and you want to know what those other type of things, it makes it all worthwhile. So really great, and appreciated Deb doing that.
He was
Great.
looking for a divorce before the wedding.
That was a close call. Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. We'll come back to you. It is now 7:15. Ms. Wertz, I'll ask you to call for the move to open the hearing on Rancho DBA Liquor Lockers. If you are here for the hearing on Rancho DBA Liquor Locker, please raise your hand. Go ahead, Ms. Wertz.
Make a motion that we open the hearing for Rancho DBA Liquor Locker 3201 Cranberry Highway, East Wareham, as application for a transfer in stock and change of officers, directors relative to Chapter 138, Section 15, all alcoholic beverage license.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion to open the hearing?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to open the hearing. Any further discussion on opening the hearing? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin,
Yes.
Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
myself, the hearing is now open. Mr. Porter and Mr. Patel are
Yes.
here on the behalf. Would you identify yourselves for the record, and which one of you are going to be speaking?
I will be speaking. My name is Matthew Porter. I'm the attorney for Ranchot Inc. Along with me tonight is Naina Bin Patel. Ms. Patel is one of the two shareholders of Ranchot Inc. That's before the board. And with that, I can certainly give a brief introduction and a summary of what we're looking to do here tonight.
Please.
So Ranchot Inc. currently is comprised of two shareholders, Suhas Patel and Naina Bin Patel, who's with us today. Ms. Patel is buying out her partner. So she'll go from being a 50% shareholder to a 100% shareholder under the corporation. She'll also be taking over the role as president, treasurer, and director. There'll be no external changes to the business whatsoever. Naina Bin Patel is already the licensed manager. She's already been an owner here. So really just an internal transfer of them buying out one of the partners. So from a outward perspective, there'll be no changes whatsoever. Just for the record, Ranchot Inc. operates Liquor Locker, which is at 3021 Cranberry Highway. So now with that, I can certainly answer any questions that the board may have, and Ms. Patel can as well.
Thank you. Ms. Patel, can you just identify yourself for the record? We can't see you, and I apologize. Thank you. If you could just identify yourself for the record so that the record will show that you're present. You're muted. You're muted. You're still muted. Okay, the record will show that Ms. Patel is present. Does any one of my board members have a question of Mr. Porter?
I just have a quick question.
Or
Mr. Porter, you said you're at 3021 Cranberry Highway. The paper I have says 3201. I would need to know which one's correct.
Let me double check.
3021.
It's yes,
It is
3021.
3021.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was advertised correctly in the paper.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
That's the only question I have.
Mr. Bessie?
Good evening. Just a quick question. Has from a state perspective, has all the paperwork been completed to reflect the change in management and shareholders and whatnot?
Yeah, so the way the ABCC requires it, which is a little bit backwards, is they have us make the changes on the Secretary of State's database before approval, and then after we update that, we can file the application with the town. once it's approved by you folks, obviously it still has to go up to ABCC approval, but everything's already been updated on Secretary of State.
Okay, perfect.
And all of
Thank
our
you.
records have been updated. The application is totally complete, Mr. Bessie.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Slavin?
Yeah, sure.
Just a quick point, we have the signed bylaw that requires only no more than 25% of any of the windows facing, the street, door, et cetera, to be covered by signs, et cetera. The rest of the windows have to be open to the police, fire to be able to look into. Just to ask to make sure they comply.
Yeah, it's an existing store, but certainly I'll make sure that they're in compliance.
It's a constant issue with liquor stores, sorry.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none, is there anyone in the audience who chooses to speak on behalf of the applicant? Please raise your hand. Is there anyone in the audience who chooses to speak against the applicant? Please raise your hand. Mr. Bessie, you'll double check that for me. I see none.
There is none. We're
Thank
clear.
you. Ms. Wertz, I'll accept a motion to close the hearing, please.
I make a motion that we close the hearing on Rancho Liquor, DBA Liquor Locker, for the transfer of stock and change in officers and directors.
Second.
Go ahead.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to complete the transfer as read. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin,
Yes.
Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself, yes, it is so. Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Porter and Ms.
Yeah,
Patel.
have a great evening. Take
Have
care.
a nice evening.
You too.
The next hearing is going to be, I believe there's a Roger Mello. If you are here to speak on the Candle Paper Lane hearing, please raise your hand. Ms. Wertz, I'll ask for a motion, please, to open the
I have
hearing.
I have a question first, and I might be ignorant about this. Do we have to also vote that we approve that we've opened and closed the Rancho item? Do we have to vote to approve it?
We just did, didn't we?
No, we just voted to open and close the meeting.
Yeah, I think we only closed it. I don't think we
We
voted on
didn't
it.
vote to.
I apologize. Okay, I'll take a motion to grant it. Sorry, I missed that one.
Make a motion that we grant the changes in officers, directors, and the transfer in stock for Rancho DBA Liquor Locker.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to grant as approved. Pretty sure we did that. Anyway, any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin,
Yes.
Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself, yes. Mr. Bowen, I'm going to ask that the hearing be open, then I'm going to ask you to run the hearing on it's a petitioned article to have a layout of a road known as Candle Paper Lane as a public way. If that's okay with you. So Ms. Wertz, may I have a motion to open the hearing, please?
make a motion that we open the Candle Paper Lane hearing to see I don't even know how to really word this.
To see if the town will accept the layout.
Accept-
Yeah,
Well, you may never see me speechless again. Make a motion. I make a
about
motion.
a motion to
Trish, just if you make a, I
open
move
the
to
hearing.
open the hearing.
Yeah.
Make a motion to open the hearing for Candle Paper Lane.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to open the hearing. Is there any further discussion on motion to open the hearing? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Slavin,
Yes.
Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
myself, yes, the hearing is opened. Mr. Bowen, I'm going to give it to you. Mr. Mello is the lead petitioner.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're welcome.
You always give it to me. So,
Sure do.
the first order of business is, do we have a layout in front of us?
It has been submitted. We don't have it in front of us, but yes, it has been submitted.
Okay, because the order of business here is for the Board of Selectmen to determine whether it wishes to accept the layout. And just for full information for the petitioner and for anybody who might be viewing this, the process is a request for a street acceptance comes in. a layout is generated. It is sent to the planning board for a recommendation. The planning board makes a recommendation. It comes back to the selectmen for a determination as to whether or not the Board of Selectmen wishes to accept the layout. If the Board of Selectmen decides to accept the layout, then that opens town meeting to the ability to be able to vote to approve the Board of Selectmen's layout. So a prerequisite of town meeting action is Board of Selectmen acceptance of the layout. If the board accepts the layout, then town meeting can vote to accept the way as a public way. If the Board of Selectmen declines to accept the layout, then town meeting is powerless to vote to accept the way. It could accept the way, but it would be an ineffective acceptance. So the purpose of this hearing would be twofold. I mean, in this case, you're going to hear from the petitioner, who will explain why accepting the layout would be a good thing. If you have the layout in front of you, then you can vote to accept or reject the layout. And if anybody wishes to comment, we can give them that opportunity. So with that.
May I ask one question, Mr. Bowen, for clarification, please? That we do have a recommendation from the planning board, but it is subject to certain restrictions.
Okay, well, certainly if you were to vote to accept the layout, you would want to incorporate those conditions into your vote of acceptance.
Thank you for the clarification.
So getting back to my original question, have you got the layout yet?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
We have seen it. The planning board has seen it. The planning board has acted on it with 4 recommendations.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. The petitioner, could you identify yourself and tell us why the Board of Selectmen should vote to accept the layout?
Roger's muted.
Mr. Mello, we need to see you and we need to hear you, sir.
Okay, can you see me?
Nope.
You can hear me though.
Yes.
Okay, why can't you see me?
There you are.
There we go. Thank you. My name is Roger Mello. I live at number 9 Candle Paper Lane in West Wareham. I've been a resident here at this location for 13 years, and I've been living in the town for nearly 40 years. I retired from the electric company, if that makes a difference, and now I will talk about Candle Paper Lane. When we built here on Candle Paper Lane, the road had not been totally completed. The base cost was on the road. The developer had sold off most of the lots, and about half of the lots had been built upon. When I checked with the town, specifically Mr. Barrett, to find out what was going on with the road, Mr. Barrett informed me that there was a performance bond that was being held by the planning board because the top coat of the road had not been finished. I reached out to the developer, Mr. William Cornish from Middleborough, and I asked if we could get this resolved. I knew he was having financial problems at that time, as well as other people were, because the economy had taken a dive. So through the conversation with Mr. Cornish, I offered to help him because I had previously, when I was in the military, I was an artillery surveyor. Then I worked for the town of Barnstable Engineering Department and also worked with the planning board there. So I had a pretty good idea of the processes involved. Mr. Cornish agreed to let me run with the ball, help him out. So through Mr. Barrett, we were able to get a couple of estimates to put the finished coat on. And there was a company by the name of Clover Paving on Cape Cod. And they came in and they finished the top coat of the road. It was about $35,000, as I recall. And at that time, because of the rules and regulations at the planning board, the only way that that check could be handed over to Clover through Mr. Foster or Mr. Cornish had to show up, sign the check, hand it over to Clover. And that took care of the final chapter of completing all the requirements that were set forth by the planning board. At that time, Mr. Gifford, I believe he was his title Director of Municipal Maintenance. I worked with him. He came out, he looked at the road, he was pleased with it. Mr. Barrett was here. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Charbonneau, I think he was the town planner at the time. He also came out, and everybody was on the same page. They felt that this was the completion to satisfy Mr. Cornish's requirement as the developer based on the town's subdivision rules and regulations. Subsequently, Mr. Cornish went door to door and picked up signatures for a petition to have Candle Paper approved as a town road. Nothing happened. I chased him down, and I know he brought it over there. And I forgot what happened with the original petition, but he had to do it a second time, which was fine. He did that. And then the planning board, because it was a bit of time that went by, they had the contractor, Mr. Rowley, I believe, is a consulting engineer for the town of Wareham. And Mr. Rowley came out, and as a civil engineer, land surveyor, he inspected the road, and he wrote a one-page report that basically said that Mr. Cornish had satisfied all of his requirements and actually went a bit above. I think the bit above was, for those of you that haven't been down Candle Paper has a curb all around both sides of the development, an actual curb stone, which is not typical of a subdivision. Most of them just have berm or nothing. And I think that might have been one of the reasons he said it was kind of above, because typically you only see curb stones down on Main Street. So having said that, everything at that point in time was satisfied. Then what was brought to my attention by Mr. Barrett was that he felt that there should be an association formed. I explained to Mr. Barrett that the only contingency that we had as owners was to satisfy some covenants. Had to be a certain size building, 2-car garage, etc. And there wasn't anything in any agreement that we were aware of requiring us to form an association. I had requested from the planning board a copy of any document just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And to this day, there has not been anything forthcoming about that. My last conversation with Mr. Cornish, and he is from Middleborough. He's not really in the business anymore, which is not totally relevant. But my conversation with him is that he actually owns Candle Paper Lane.
Right.
My deed, my legal document says that I own to the sideline of the road. I don't own the road. The assessor's office has been taxing Mr. Cornish for the road, the cul-de-sac, in which I believe he does pay the bill. So for whatever that is worth, we, the residents here, which 50% of the residents, by the way, are veterans, do not own this road. The legal ownership of the road is Mr. Cornish. I know he has no vested interest in it, so I've had to proceed kind of gingerly with this whole issue with him. But from my position as a resident, and I analyze this, I feel that Mr. Cornish met his obligation, his contractual obligation with the town. He did do a nice job here. He built a nice road. Why it's so narrow, I don't know. Every road project I was involved in, it was typically 24 feet. This is a narrow road. They put curbstones on both sides. There was a fire here one year. The fire department had trouble with their equipment. It went on and on. However, we have to live with that. We can't park on the road. We all have to park in our driveways. So having said that, my apologies for being verbose. I feel everything has been done. Mr. Rowley put his blessings on it, so to speak. And I don't think it would be fair to the residents here to not have candle paper accepted as a town road.
Mr. Mello, could we ask, Madam Chairman, do you have the planning board's list of recommendations?
I do not, but I can bring them up.
Thanks. Well, let's
Yeah.
just hold on for a minute and see what the planning board says. Since
Mr.
there are-
Buckland, Mr. Buckland, maybe you can bring it up faster than I can, because I know you're in the audience. Go ahead. There are 4 recommendations, and it includes the requirement of creating a homeowners association. It's not a recommendation. It's from the planning board. It is a document from the planning board. If you hang on, I'll try and find it. And I apologize for not having it.
Now, this was a contingency that was required
No, Mr.
from
Mello.
the planning board?
No, yeah, Mr. Mello, in the beginning, when I said the process was that when the selectmen get a request to accept a street, they refer the matter to the planning board for a recommendation. So what Ms. Whiteside is doing right now is gathering up the 4 recommendations from the planning board that the planning board has made to the Board of Selectmen. But basically, the planning board has said to the Board of Selectmen, we're in favor of you laying out this road if the 4 conditions that we recommend are met. And so now we're waiting to hear what those 4 recommendations are.
Thank you.
And it's muted.
I apologize.
I can bring this up now.
Thank you. The record will show that Mr. Buckland is in the meeting. Mr. Buckland is our town planner and has been present at all of the planning board meetings. Mr. Buckland, can you read the recommendations into the record, sir?
Yeah, the recommended acceptance is predicated on the following conditions. The acceptance is for the right-of-way and the as-built improvements within the right-of-way for public vehicular access, the paved road and curbs. The acceptance does not include any drainage structures or sidewalk. The acceptance does not include public or private utilities within the right-of-way. The acceptance does not include the parcel within the circle identified as Lot ME. As maintenance other than the street is required, a homeowners association or other suitable organization must be formed to maintain Lot ME and the drainage system and drainage.
So Ken, let's just go back for a second on that, just so we're clear, or I'm clear on what's being said here. We're not accepting utilities. We're not accepting sidewalks. And the reason for the homeowners association recommendation is that there's a parcel of the land in the middle of a cul-de-sac.
That's right.
that
In this
needs to
particular
be-
design, the cul-de-sac has a landscape parcel in the middle of it.
Okay, so thanks, Ken. Mr. Mello, so you've heard the planning board's recommendations. So what's your ability to meet those recommendations?
My conversations with the residents here on candle paper, they have no interest in forming an association. They do not feel that they should be responsible for the drainage. The utilities, I don't know of any developments in town that are responsible for the utilities. Typically, it was the electric company that I retired from, transformers and the like. I am very puzzled that these issues have come to the surface because Mr. Cornish was never informed or any of us residents that this was going to be a requirement.
Well,
I
Mr. Mello,
believe
just,
if I
Mr.
could-
Mello, just so that we can clarify where we are right now. Whatever conditions were put on that allowed the subdivision to go forward were put on. But what the petitioners are asking for now is something different, something further, which is that the town accept the road, and a precondition of town meeting being able to, having the power to vote to accept the road is the selectmen to vote to accept the layout. So what you're in the position right now of having to win the approval of the Board of Selectmen to lay the road out. So technically what happened with Mr. Cornish in the past, it isn't really material to what the selectmen are going to have to figure out. And so I suppose the question for the selectmen right now probably is, and pardon me, board members, if I'm presuming to speak for you, is are you going to be able to meet the recommendations of the planning board?
Thank you, Mr. Bowen. Ms. Wertz, do you have a question?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm not confused. Basically, the road is a private piece of land right now, along with its little island. And it sounds like the developer is paying taxes on it. The money that those taxes bring in helps probably the town to do anything that might help the road unofficially without being accepted. No, Alan says no. Okay, so regardless of that, regardless of what happens, what I don't hear is if the town accepts the road, does the developer then, is there a legal way where the developer then gives the land for the road to the towns? Or, I mean, that's another whole piece that I don't hear anything here answering.
Mr. Bowen?
Could the developer give the land to the town? Certainly.
So if he doesn't give the land to the town, and the town accepts the road and the cost of it, there seems to be a real conflict of who would really be responsible for the road, which is why I think they're asking for the association to be put in place.
Thank
Well,
you.
with your permission, Madam Chairman.
Yeah.
If the town were to, if the Board of Selectmen were to vote to accept the layout, and then thus giving town meeting the ability to vote to accept the way would become a public way, and the town would have, and the public, an implied easement to travel over the now public way, the accepted way, even though Mr. Cornish or whatever his legal entity is would still own the land. Now, Ken, please correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm addressing the planning director. My understanding of what you said about the condition was not that the recommended homeowners association would maintain the road. I mean, that wouldn't make sense, because if you accept a way as a public way, then the town maintains the road. My understanding of the homeowners association recommendation was that was to maintain the island, if I'm characterizing it properly, and also to maintain any sidewalks. Have I got that right?
Mr. Buckland?
That's correct. And it also includes the drainage system as well.
So there are several things that are that the planning board has recommended
That's
before.
right. That the
before
town would
the-
take over responsibility for maintaining the way and having it free and open for passage of vehicles, including plowing of snow or whatever else is necessary to clean it up. But that the drainage system and the landscaped island would be the responsibility of those homeowners that live around it.
Okay,
Is
Mr.
this
Bessie,
typical?
excuse me, Mr. Bessie, you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple. So I have a couple of concerns, and I think they're valid. So we've got an area of town. I mean, how many homes do we have on Candlepiper Lane?
12.
Candlepaper Lane, 12 homes. So a couple of the concerns that I have is one, obviously, and I think the planning board has kind of addressed several of them, the drainage in the community, the cul-de-sac and stuff like that. If as a town, it was voted to be accepted as a road, and there's no association or whatnot that has been formed, there's a lot of financial responsibility that now gets turned over to the town, that I don't think should have to be put on eventually the taxpayers in the town, because anything that gets fixed via municipal maintenance or whatever, what have you, ends up, being taxpayer funded in some way. So, and furthermore, that property itself, the roadway, the cul-de-sac, all being owned by a private entity, maybe it needs to go back to, he's responsible for the roadway, the cul-de-sac, the drainage. I don't know. I haven't read through what the stipulations were from the town when the development was approved. I know that, different developments have different approvals and different requirements of things that the town would expect to either do A, B, or C. I haven't seen those, but my concern is that if we even decided to say, yeah, we agree and we approve it and whatnot, that eventually the taxpayers, essentially that money that the taxpayers pay is going to go to things that, maybe it should go to something else. So financially, I think that's a big question. I agree. I think there needs to be some type of an association that is formed to curb those things that need to be fixed, if the owner of the property, as far as the roadway is concerned, isn't willing to take on those responsibilities. So that's kind of what I have at this point.
Okay, Mr. Bowen. I believe that we've heard from the petitioner. I believe that we should now ask if there are any other questions from my board, but I don't. Yes, Ms. Wertz.
I just have one other quick question. Mr. Mello, you had mentioned that the fire departments and possibly the police departments had trouble getting down the road. So even if we clear everything else, is the road specifically, at the town level, do we accept a road that cannot fit our service equipment down it?
I don't think that that's a question that Mr. Mello can answer, Ms. Wertz. I think it's a good question, but I don't believe it's a question that he's qualified to answer. Mr. Bowen.
Mr. Bowen, yeah.
Yeah, no, Mr. Bowen, I would remind everyone that the planning board heard this petition within the past 4 months and has sent its recommendation to us. Any previous recommendations are stale. And so I would ask Mr. Bowen if it would now be appropriate to hear if there's anybody in the audience who wants to support this petition.
Sure.
Because it is a hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who chooses to support this petition? Please raise your hand. If you choose to speak against it, please raise your hand. Mr. Bessie, would you double check for me, please? Mr. Hurd?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I was gonna say Mr. Hurd has his hand raised.
Okay. Noah, would you let Mr. Hurd in, please? Mr. Hurd, would you identify yourself for the record, please? Mr. Hurd?
I'm sorry, David Hurd, resident of Wareham. I was concerned about the road and whether or not it has the capacity to handle emergency vehicles. We heard early on that there have been problems in the past. I believe Roger Mello mentioned that. And if it doesn't meet the requirements for present day vehicles and present day requirements for the road, I would be hesitant to have the town take it over at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hurd. Mr. Slavin, you have a question?
Not so much a question, it's just the whole process. When a subdivision is done, you know, the developer has the choice of, in the contracts to the people who buy the property, to state that at a certain point of time, usually 50% or more, that the people that have bought the properties will form a homeowners association, in which they take over the responsibilities of the road, you know, utility poles, drainage, etc. Or he can do nothing and he keeps the responsibility of that. So in this particular case here, we have a developer who never set up a requirement for a homeowners association. The homeowners, unfortunately, didn't look close enough as to what the end result could be, and the developer never really followed through completely. And now we're sitting in 2023, and unfortunately, they have to meet the current, you know, regulations. It doesn't matter what happened 10 or 15 years ago. I understand the problem. It's very discouraging for them, but they have to meet the current standards that we have. And the current standards has to do with drainage these days, sidewalks, the utility poles that the utility companies don't own on the subdivisions. It's usually the developer paid for them. And we have a problem that the planning board, as required, had said that the only way the Board of Selectmen should go ahead and accept the layout is if these conditions are made. So we have no choice but to go ahead and say, okay, if we want to bring this to town meeting, these conditions have to be met in order for, you know, for town meeting to say yes. And I don't think, I spoke to Roger once already, so I must make it clear. I don't think at this particular time that they're willing to set up a homeowners association or deal with the drainage. So we're at a stalemate.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Slavin. Mr. Mello, no. Mr. Mello previously stated that the residents were not willing to make a homeowners association. Is there anybody else who would like to speak either in favor or against this petition in the audience? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will ask for a motion to close the hearing.
I did have one other question.
No, excuse me, Mr.
Permissible?
No,
I never finished I
You
only have
did,
one
sir.
question.
you have a question, sir? What is it?
My question is this the new requirement for any developer coming in, that they will have to have an association? Is that in the new planning board rules
Mr.
and
Mello,
regulations?
we are specifically speaking about your road only. And none of us so that's the only question that I would allow anybody to answer. So this is the requirement from the planning board to this specific petition.
I see.
Thank you, Mr. Mello. Ms. Wertz, may I have a motion to close the hearing, please?
Make a motion, we close the Candle Paper Lane hearing
Is there a
on
second to that motion?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to close the hearing. Any further discussion on whether to close the hearing? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote to close the hearing. Mr. Slavin,
Yes.
Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Ms. Wertz,
yes.
and myself, yes, the hearing is closed. We will not vote on this until later on in the meeting because we are voting on many articles this evening. Mr. Mello, thank you for your patience and have a good evening. Next on the agenda is a presentation by Mr. Pigeon, and I believe, Mr. Pigeon, you have Ms. Greenberg and Mr. Drainville here with you. Is that correct? If they are to be speaking, please raise your hand. This would be on Article 26, which is the ask of Mr. Drainville, Mr. Pigeon, and Ms. Greenberg. Noah, if you would let them in, please.
Rich has a new hairpiece.
I'm sorry?
Rich has a new hairpiece.
Mr. Pigeon, Ms. Greenberg, and Mr. Drainville, would you identify yourselves for the record, please?
I'll go first. I'm Mark Drainville with GHD.
Thank you. Mr. Pigeon or Ms. Greenberg, identify yourself for the record, please.
Sarah Greenberg with GHD.
Thank you. Mr. Pigeon? Mr. Pigeon, would you identify yourself for the record, please? Mr. Pigeon, would you identify yourself for the record, please? I can neither see you nor hear you, Mr. Pigeon. Okay. Mr. Drainville, I believe you have a presentation, is that correct?
Yes, we do have one.
And
Sarah,
I'm going to ask my board if it's okay if we proceed with the presentation without Mr. Pigeon quite being able to get into the meeting at the moment. Is that okay with any of you?
It is, but I notice he's blinking on and off as being able to get in.
Well, he may be able to get in, but I want to,
Yeah.
this meeting is going to be a long meeting if we don't move along.
Yes,
Mr.
Okay.
Drainville, please. Oh, Mr. Pigeon, are you there?
yes, I believe I am, and thank you very much for having us before you. And I would encourage you to.
Can you identify yourself for the record, sir?
Certainly, it's Bernie Pigeon, Chairman of the Board of Sewer Commissioners. And we have a presentation by GHD this evening for Article 26. And I'm sure they've will answer a number of questions that we had previously from the special town meeting. So by all means, since in the purpose of time frame, why don't you go ahead and Mark or Sarah, please begin your presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Drainville, go ahead.
so Sarah was gonna, if she could share her screen.
Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, select board members, for having us here tonight. We're here tonight to talk about Fall Town Meeting Article 26. This is the Clarifier and Headworks Upgrade Project, approving borrowing of construction funds for this project that is currently in design. It was approved for design last Fall Town Meeting, and we've come before the select board a couple times with presenting on this project. However, we hope that tonight we are providing some additional answers and answering some good questions that had come up in the special town meeting and previous presentations. And before we dive into the specifics of the project, I wanted to take a quick step back and just show an overview of the Wareham Water Pollution Control Facility. This shows you the process that the wastewater takes as it's treated from beginning to end, where it comes in from the collection environment. So you'll see in area 1 is our headworks that has our influence screens and our grit removal. Those are the processes, the first that the wastewater sees when it enters from the collection system. And that's where the wipes and large objects are removed. And that's where sand and grit that comes in from the collection system is removed. Headworks is also the area in which we'll have septage receiving. That is where septage haulers that pump septic trucks, tanks, from the town and surrounding areas come to the facility to discharge, and for a fee they can discharge, and the treatment plant will treat the septage. Then the wastewater from headworks continues to area 2, which is the bulk of the treatment process. Those are the aeration basins where the microbes and the bugs do treat the wastewater so that it can move on to area 3, the circular secondary clarifiers, where the microbes that have been treating the wastewater settle to the bottom, allowing the clarified clear liquid up top to remain up top and pass on to the next stages of treatment at the facility, which is area 4, the denitrification filters. And those are sand filters that the clarified liquid from the clarifiers continues on to and passes through, so we can get the remainder of our nitrogen removal, so that to get down to the levels in accordance with the facility's permit for discharge. So it can be safely released back into the environment, but not before it goes to area 5, ultraviolet disinfection. And that is where the wastewater then is disinfected, so it can now be released back in to the ecosystem. Area 6, the outfall of the Agawam River. So with that high level overview, this article and this project concerns 2 of the areas, the headworks and the clarifiers. Most of the equipment throughout the facility is at its useful life expectancy, and we call that for equipment about 20 years. Equipment can of course last longer than that, but then you run into extra costs of maintenance and the risk of it starting to have more problems and cost more. And so while there, of course, are many needs at the facilities that have been identified over the years, these areas 1 and 3, the headworks and the clarifier upgrade, have become the most urgent. And that is the bulk of the Article 26 that we're talking about here tonight. So again, at headworks, as I mentioned, that's the first treatment process that the wastewater sees when it comes to the facility. And it's gets the most abuse. It's there to protect the downstream equipment and processes that are sensitive. You can see in the photos here that the air, due to the nature of wastewater, is highly corrosive, and between the corrosion and the equipment being at about its life expectancy, is starting to corrode, and the equipment shown here, objects, and then the grit system here are the dumpsters here that's allowing the sand and the grit to settle out to be removed. Those are starting to fail, and they're no longer doing their job as they should. They're no longer removing those objects, and that which is allowing it to continue to the rest of the treatment process. I also mentioned that septic receiving is at headworks, and so this is where, again, septic haulers that pump septic tanks around the town can come and for a fee offload their septage to be treated at the facility. Unfortunately, since the septic receiving equipment also is failing and at the end of its life expectancy, the septic receiving has been shut down for about 6 months or so. And so that is a loss of revenue to the facility that could be used for maintenance and other things at the facility. And of course, since the headworks equipment is not removing the screenings and the grit and allowing it to continue throughout the treatment plant, that can cause additional maintenance, having to take down tanks more frequently than needed for cleaning, having to pull wipes and such from pumps and other equipment. And that just adds additional maintenance costs to the rest of the process due to the headworks equipment failing. And the second component of this project that is in design is the secondary clarifiers. So from that original image, I showed area 3, and the secondary clarifiers are critical to meeting permit. So for the facility to be able to meet its discharge permit of what parameters the wastewater needs to meet and be at to be able to release safely back into the ecosystem. So currently the clarifiers do not meet current design standard, the existing ones. They are too shallow. So as I described, when the wastewater, after the microbes have treated the wastewater and settle, the clarifier being too shallow causes it to not treat and be as efficient as it should otherwise. In addition, much of the equipment is 40 years old or double the life expectancy. So between the clarifier being too shallow and the equipment failing, that's causing the clarifier to not work as it should. And what do we mean by failing? So on the left, you can see a working clarifier. Of course, as I mentioned, the clear liquid, the clarified liquid, if you will, should rise to the top, continue on to the next stages of treatment to be released back into the ecosystem. And on the right, you see an image of one of the clarifiers at the Wareham Water Pollution Control Facility that mechanisms broke. So part of the equipment broke on the clarifier, and also due to its shallow nature, you see that there's scum and particles that haven't settled and that are at the top and continue on to other treatment processes, actually cause other treatment processes to fail. And we were talking about that could impact meeting permit. And of course, meeting permit is very critical for facilities, of course, to prevent environmental contamination and impacts such as recreational beach closures or shell fishing closures. And of course, if a facility consistently does not meet permit, the federal government can impose regulatory fines and a consent order for the issue to be resolved. And while that doesn't happen a lot, there are, of course, examples. You can see here an article from the Environmental Protection Agency's website, June 2021, showing that the sanitary sewage was discharged into the environment in the city of Quincy, and the Environmental Protection Agency issued a consent order to the city to remediate this. And the remedial measures, as you can see in the heading here, are expected to be in excess of 100 million. So meeting permit is very critical, of course. And we've talked a lot about equipment is at its 20 years and at its life expectancy, but of course, this work has been identified in various needs and assessments for a few years now, as early as 2015 in the capital improvement plan. And that looked at the wastewater facility, but also the supporting collection system. And what's the equipment, what are the needs in the town, and for the wastewater facility of what needs to be repaired, improved, upgraded, et cetera. And most recently, in 2021, in the plant evaluation, and that focused specifically at the wastewater facility, looking at equipment there, on all the equipment, what is the age and what's the condition of the equipment and what's its likelihood of failure, as well as if it does fail, what would that consequence be? And so that analysis results in a list of priority projects, of which the headworks equipment and the secondary clarifiers, those upgrades are at the top of that priority list. And so again, while the needs have been identified for many years, the need for this work has just become that much more urgent, given that the equipment is failing. And one good question that needs to be answered is, how does this fit in with the larger planning project? The town, of course, is also undergoing upgrades to its comprehensive wastewater management plan. So looking at a whole 20-year planning effort of what are the environmental needs in the town, what are the growth and economic needs for the town. And so how does this work fit in? Is upgrading the headworks equipment and the clarifiers, is that going to be a Band-Aid, something that will need to be undone or changed in the future? And the answer is no. This work is not a Band-Aid. In fact, it's as part of this planning project and being done in tandem with this planning project. This figure here does a good job of illustrating the planned expansions or the proposed phasing, if you will. And you can see here in yellow highlighted, these are the areas that are part of the current headworks and clarifier upgrade project. And you can see that how they fit in and that they're a foundational step to being able to expand at the facility to 2 and 3 million gallons per day, for example, shown here in green and blue. So that I of course showed some expansion and some future steps. And so of course the question then arises of what else is needed in addition to this project. And here's a table that shows phasing of, while we sit here at phase 2, where the capacity of the facility is not being increased. It's still at our 1.56 MGD. It's process upgrades to address the age-related needs of the facility, but the design is taking into account the future needs, and so allowing this to be a foundation, a step to be able to expand the future facility, so that when we come to the next phase of 2A, where we can actually expand the facility to 2 million gallons per day. And that's so that you can start to get expansion, increase your discharge, bring in more sewering, whether it's new residentials and new commercials, and addressing environmental needs. And so you can see here projected estimated costs for these phasings to get us up to 3 million gallons per day. This is all again within the construct of the comprehensive planning program that is underway. But of course, so this is work that's at the facility to get to that expansion. And we showed in the previous slide how that expansion can fit at the facility. And of course, then the other items needed are the support systems of that. So if the facility is being expanded in flow, then new discharge needs to be found of the treated wastewater. Right now, of course, we're at the 1.56 million gallons that can be discharged. So for increasing to 2 or 3, you either increase the existing permit, or you find other recharge locations for that treated wastewater. And then, of course, there's the support of the collection system, whether it's existing collection system upgrades and replacement, or whether it's bringing in new sewer areas as you go through phases of expansion and sewering to meet the environmental needs, but also the growth needs and the economic needs of the town. So in summary of this project, to bring it back to the Article 26 that's on the fall town meeting warrant, this project is the replacement of equipment expectancy, but the design considers the future needs of the town, so that this project is a foundational step for future growth of the facility. And as the article indicates, the anticipated costs are up to $36 million. And the payment for this is through a state fund program, a loan program. And this program is being pursued by the town because of all of the benefits, such as the 10% principal forgiveness that will be afforded to the town of Wareham. And it says minimum here because there are additional monies that are being provided to this state funding program through the infrastructure bill that was previously approved. So that principal forgiveness is anticipated to be greater. But at a minimum, 10% of that loan is automatically forgiven, or grant money coming right back to you. And of the remainder, 17% of the upgrades of this loan is contribution by Bourne through the intermunicipal agreement with upgrades at the facility and working on at the facility. And then the remaining balance after that is funded through the sewer budget. And the sewer commission, the town, have estimated that it will cost users approximately somewhere in the $40 per year per user range for the Wareham users. And so that's the summary of the article and the projects. And so where we sit now is we have, the project is approved and on the funding list for the state. The state has approved that this can be a project that can move forward through this loan program. And the design funds were approved last fall in town meeting, and the project is currently under design and underway. And so the next stage to make sure that the town can be considered for the funding is to appropriate and approve the borrowing authorization for the construction costs for this project that is currently in design. And of course, the deadline is end of October, or the state will give the funding to other communities. So this just was a summary presentation to hopefully answer some questions that have come up at previous meetings, as well as provide sort of a summary of this Article 26 that we're coming up at fall town meeting. And so I'd like to open it to any questions.
Okay, Ms. Greenberg, a couple of things, please. Can you go back to the original overview so that shows the map? Because I'd like to have the people watching this see where the neighborhoods are. Can you, with your, the river is clear, but can you show where there might be houses or other neighbors? Who are the neighbors? And second of all, I need you to send this to us tomorrow for our records, the whole presentation.
Not a problem.
Okay, great.
This evening. Yes, not a problem. So if your question is,
it's about neighbors.
Residences around here, if you can see the laser pointer by area 3 off to the right of the page here, there is a school, an elementary school, I believe. And up here in the upper left-hand corner off the page again is residential neighborhoods down sort of in this tidal area. And there's a road again back here off the screen, if you can follow the laser pointer, sort of in the upper part of the screen. And then down, and then of course off the screen in this direction to the right is Campina Way and some residential area there. And the river meanders on the left-hand side down here, but then also curves to the right and under. So if that answers your question.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
Do any of my members have questions? Please raise your hand. Mr. Bessie.
Okay. Where to start? Let me start at let me go right to the end. Let me go to the money. Let me start there. If my memory serves me correct, when we were talking about the money and what it would cost users, and we were still trying to define what the use was it actual users or was it every resident that owns a home in town? But if I remember correctly, the amount to be repaid per user or whatever that was defined as seems to be significantly less now than it was when we were talking at special town meeting. Special town meeting, we were talking $80 to $85 per user, and now you're talking 40 to 46. Why so drastically lower?
Chairman, may I answer that, please?
Yes, Mr. Pigeon.
If you recall, at the last town meeting, we had two articles on the warrant. The second one was passed, which was the $84 per EDU. And that went by. So this is the only one that was not passed at that special town meeting. And this one was priced out with Mr. Sullivan and Mr. Foster at $46 per EDU.
So that $46 is going to be added to an $84. Is that, am I understanding that correctly, or am I wrong?
Correct.
I believe it would, yes.
Okay, so now we're talking about was that $130 per EDU?
That's what it came to at the special, yes.
Okay, so how long is that repayment?
Mr. Foster would have to arrange that. I would presume to be about 20 years.
Could be
So we're
20
talking,
years. Yep,
Mr. Sullivan,
20.
20 years.
so we're talking about an additional $2,000-ish per. Now, when we talk about, are we talking, when we're talking EDUs, I want to be clear in understanding here. Are we talking about just homes that are using town sewer, or are we talking about every home in town would be responsible for this repayment?
No, we were talking about just the individual homes that are tied into the sewer system. Town meeting determined that the sewer system was going to be totally supported by fees through the enterprise fund.
So, and so I guess the biggest question is how, so if we're adding $130 per user per year, how is that going to, it looks like 2027 is when the repayments would, how are we phasing in, or how would we phase in this $130 per year to the users?
Because, and let me add part that question, because there's going to be interim costs. There will be an end bond for 20 years or something. There'll be interim borrowing costs, right, Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, so just so everybody understands, this would be, you're looking at an ED, first of all, an EDU is an equalized dwelling unit. And that is essentially a single family home, EDUs. So two family would have two EDUs. Some businesses, it's set up differently by tables or bathrooms. A business could have 20 EDUs. So that it goes across the whole gamut from residential to commercial. You'll have some short-term borrowing, but if my understanding is correct, this is since this is going through the SRF funding, they usually don't set it up that way where you don't have to pay it until the end. This impact would begin, I believe, in fiscal, depending on the time frame, you'd probably look at fiscal 2026 for this. And what's happening is, as the other debt is falling off, that's where this is coming in. That's why your delta is 46 rather than a higher amount, if you will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Bessie?
So yeah, okay, so partly that answers my question. So now we're talking, so if somebody has a 3-family home, they're paying 3 EDUs. But so if a business, let's say a business, as Mr. Sullivan has stated, could have 20, I mean, now you're talking over the life, you're talking about a $40,000+ investment from potentially one individual enterprise, business, what have you. So those costs are eventually they're gonna have to pass those costs down. So we're talking about affecting, businesses that might be leasing properties here in town from larger development units. So I see a lot of money being spent. I just don't know that I'm satisfied with the amount that it's going to cost the users, especially with all of the other things that have kind of been thrown on, the new school, and what in 5 years, if we go to phase 2 and you're talking about another 55 million, now you're adding, okay, maybe now it's another $300 a year. So there's a lot of costs that are going to be continuing into the future. So I guess my question is what could the potential all-in added spending from an EDU standpoint could be $300, $400, $500, $600 a year. I mean, I guess we don't know those because they're only estimated costs. But if I'm looking at the progression, it's 36 million today that we're asking for. And then within a certain window of time, say the next 5 years, we're going to be asking for another 55. And then maybe another 5 years down the road, we're asking for another 55. So there's going to be continual asks over the next, 5 to 15 years in order to satisfy all of what we need to do to have a necessary, let me call it a necessary evil. We need to be able to treat this somehow, but at what expense? And that's my concern, is if we do this now, is it going to cost us more down the road, as opposed to, hey, let's look at an entire, which I still really haven't seen, and I would have loved to seen, hey, if we did a project today and we started from zero, what would it cost us to do a complete facility? And I would have loved to have seen a comparison. I did kind of mention that in the special town meeting, that I'd love to see what those numbers look like. And maybe it was time prohibitive, or maybe it just didn't want to be shown. But I would have loved to seen a comparison, so that at least the taxpayers, the people that are going to vote on this, would be able to see the today in the short term, or the today in the long term. But we seem to be only seeing a phased approach. And I wish we just could have seen a holistic approach to what a bottom end dollar for a finalized project like some of these other towns and communities have gone through. And we've seen that they cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But that, I guess that's kind of where I stand, is the money still seems to stick to me a little bit, and I'm concerned what it's going to do to some of our residents that are struggling to afford now to be able to stay and survive. Are they going to be able to continue to stay and survive with all of the additional money that we're going to be putting on top of them?
Thank you. Mr. Drainville, I think you had your hand up to answer him.
Yeah, just a couple of points. We're happy to develop a cost for a new plant. I will say that it will be more because what we're doing is using as much existing facilities as we can. So, but we could develop that, and we'll do that just to show a comparison. I did want to point out one additional item. As you go beyond this phase, the intention would be to be able to bring in more flow into the plant. So that would mean more users to depress the overall cost overall for each user, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Drainville. Mr. Pigeon, did you want to add it into this?
Yes, and speaking in some of these, to address some of these figures, these are gross figures. If you project it forward, they spoke in terms of septage, which we don't receive anymore. When we discontinued that, we were on average a gross of $600,000 a year. And also, as Mr. Sullivan has pointed out, as we go forward, some of our current borrowing is going to fall off. And so there's a gap of about, if I recall, around 400,000 that we currently are paying in debt services that we won't have, that are going to be dropping off. They in turn, without changing the rates, could absorb some of this 36 million payments that you were alluding to. And as far as going forward, we do have, Mark has mentioned, we do have figures about that. We are trying to determine what we need, because we're in a moratorium, and the town, as far as growth is concerned, is at a standstill. And so we have to go forward with that. And yes, it does cost money. As Sarah has pointed out, in 2015, these headworks and clarifiers were priced at 18 million, and we're now up to 36 million.
Thank you, Mr. Pigeon. I'm going to remind you all that it's now 8:30 and we have a very lengthy agenda before us. So I would ask that you try not to be repetitive in your questions or comments. Ms. Wertz, you were next.
Yes, I've been kind of following around Mr. Drainville and the various presentations to the different groups. And I went to the FinCom meeting a week or so ago, and it was the first meeting we'd had in conjunction with Bourne for a long time. And one of the discussions I had with one of the members there who is on their SOAR board, but had also been a select board member for years, was how do you really approach this in terms of pricing and responsibility? And there clearly was a conversation where we're looking at this part, you know, is repairing the septic system, the SOAR system for current users, but in line with the fact that what the state is going to more and more demand in terms for coverage for SOAR and the growth of the town, that there's remaining other parts of the development really needed to be looked at as a full town cost, not just who has SOAR right now. And it gave a whole different perspective on how to look at this pricing and cost thing, because Ron, where you are, I was right there like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago. But I think we really need to, as we present this to our citizens, present the concept of here we are now and then what has to be done and where it goes with the future, and get that knowledge built into what our citizen base has to understand. So that's a comment. And Mr. Drainville, if I'm off base, can you please clean up what I said?
Okay, Ms. Wertz, thank you. Mr. Slavin, that wasn't a question, Ms. Wertz, that was more a statement, right?
Right.
Okay, Mr. Slavin.
Okay, this is difficult to deal with because I feel that all of us in town administration, town government, everybody has basically done the old pay me now, pay me later, which basically is let's bury our heads and ignore what happens. There's no such thing as a facility that can go 50, 60 years. A quick example is you have a 60-year-old car, which I just had. I had to rebuild everything. And at the end of it, even though I rebuilt everything, I still had a 60-year-old car. I'm concerned that the plant, no matter what you do, is going to be obsolete because the changes and developments going through. I don't have a lot of faith in the condition of the plant overall. I don't have a lot of faith in getting a new comprehensive wastewater management plan done in a timely fashion. I don't know what they're going to require us to increase the actual capacity going out. We don't get an increase in capacity, we're basically out of the wind. The TMDL we know is coming down. We've got notice, we're going to have a meeting coming. I think Derek got notice and I did. The TMDL change is going to mean everybody in town is going to have either a massive nitrogen reducing system or has to be on sewer. These are expenses that the town really can't afford. And I have a hard time believing anything that's been thrown before me because I don't know what the actual condition of the plant is. You have a plant, again, that's 50 to 60 years old, and there's no way that the facility's there. We have sewer lines that are collapsing everywhere. We have issues all the way through. These are all things that we're ignoring right now as potential expenses. I'm at a loss because we've allowed this to get to a point where I'll use the word which most people understand. It's called FUBAR. I won't explain what it means because I'll get in trouble. But we've really let this thing go too far, and we're all responsible for it. And I'm really embarrassed that we're at a position right now that no matter what the consultant comes up with, the overall game is not here. There is no solution here right now. This is just a Band-Aid, and just be prepared to spend a lot of money over the next 10 to 15 years. Thank you.
Well, I haven't heard a question yet, but that's okay. So I have one question. You had said, I'm not sure which one can answer this, but the plan will be ready by the end of October. Is that correct, Mr. Drainville or Ms. Greenberg? The wastewater, the comprehensive
By the end of the year.
By the end of the
draft
year?
By the end of the year, yeah.
Okay, I thought you had mentioned October.
No, by the end of this year is when the draft, yeah.
Okay, and then I would like to say that I appreciate the fact that this presentation is a far more substantive presentation than you've given before. I think it raises some questions, but I think it gives the residents of the town, and particularly the users, an enormous amount of information. And I think I might ask Mr. Sullivan if it's possible to actually have this presentation posted on the website. It is. Mr. Pigeon, would you think that that was a good idea, sir?
I think it's an outstanding idea, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks. I had one for the night. Yippee, Mr. Drainville.
Sorry, just one last thing. There were many good questions that came up prior to and at the town meeting this summer. And the challenge that we've just been facing is we've been doing 2 projects concurrent with each other, and we needed the planning project to just get up to a point where we could present this information here. So had we had it in the spring, we would have presented. It's just a timing issue. So
thank you.
That was it.
Does any one of my board members have a question? No more comments, please.
No.
Okay, Mr. Sullivan, do you have any questions?
No, I think one of the big things is coming down the pike is the TMDL, which is the total maximum daily load, or in other words, what you can put into a body of water and still keep it healthy. I thought that we had a pretty draconian septic setback from waterways already through our Board of Health. I will tell you, it's roughly tripled by what the DEP has been doing. So we're going to see people that have put in probably newer septics, perhaps have to upgrade them to the nitrogen reduction. Those are not cheap. They also need to be consistently run with blowers, so electrical use. So you're going to see that coming down. It's going to be people that never in their wildest dreams thought they'd have to do this. So you're right. The engineers will moan. The solution to pollution is dilution, right? That's always the old adage. But the best way to reduce these costs would be to bring more users online, which is what helps the environment. So it's a bit of a conundrum. So
thank you. Mr. Drainville?
Last comment from me. Selectman Slavin is correct that there are portions of a plant that are very similar to a car, and they won't last beyond 20 years or so. I guess what I would ask is that everybody think of a treatment facility more like a house, that a house can last for 70, 100 plus years. There are portions of it that the structure that will last, but you have the interior portions that you will have to continue to upgrade. And that's kind of what we're looking at with this facility. There are pieces of it that are in very good shape and will last a long time. We're looking to address those that do not last that long, 20 years or so.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask that Ms. Greenberg, you send the presentation to Mr. Sullivan and to me, or to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow, please. And I'm going to say I didn't hear any questions, but I heard a lot of comments, and I think we should move on, if that's okay with you. And I would say thank you, Mr. Drainville, Ms. Greenberg, and Mr. Pigeon. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you.
We will not be voting on this until later on in the meeting. Okay, Mr. Buckland, I believe I'll have you come back to sit with us. Oh, did you ever go away? No, awesome. Mr. Buckland,
Yes.
you have several articles on this warrant. Would you choose to quickly summarize? And then we will have questions from my board members, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. Sherry Quirk may be on as well, too.
I'm sorry?
Sherry
Oh,
Quirk.
yes,
may be
sure.
on as well,
Ms.
too.
Quirk, would you raise your hand? I'm sorry, I forgot that.
Well, she's getting on. Let me start.
Yes,
on this.
please.
Save some time.
Yep.
This has come about as a result of work that started back in 2022. The planning board got busy with the zoning bylaws and formed a subcommittee. The subcommittee right now is made up of Sherry Quirk, Carl Schultz, and Jane Gleason on the planning board. And Julie Moran of the finance committee is also, who also is a real estate lawyer, is also assisting in the process.
Noah, would you let Ms. Scoggin in, please? She's got her hand up. Go ahead.
But Julia is not a member of the committee.
No.
No, she's not.
So just, sorry to clarify, I had to run there. Was there a subcommittee created by the planning board, or was there a working group? You used the
There's a
term
working group.
A working group, yes. Essentially, it started as a pet project of the chairman of the board, who looked at site plan review and decided that it should be altered in some ways to correct some of the problems with it. Because the planning board does a lot of site plan reviews in their review of projects that come before the town. That was where the core of the changes were. But when you start looking at the Article 15, and maybe I should call them Section 15 actually, because there's some confusion sometimes between the zoning articles. They are
Okay,
articles
so we are
themselves.
speaking about Article 22, which is called Clarification of Zoning Bylaws, Article 15, Land Use.
That's right.
Good.
That's right. Exactly.
Excellent.
The number of problems with the Article 15 or Section 15 of the zoning bylaws. One being that the administrative requirements, such as how many plans have to be submitted with the application, are included in the zoning bylaw. And what that means is that if somebody only submits 12 plans instead of 14 plans, they should actually be getting a variance from the Board of Appeals. You can see how crazy that is. So what I recommended was that those go into the administrative rules and regulations, a separate document that's created by the Land Use Board, and it's in force after a public hearing and when it's filed with the town clerk. This morphs into a general description of all permitting, so that a person could follow along with the zoning bylaws and try to understand, better understand how the permit process works and who is involved in it and what would be considered when they go before the board and with their project. So the goals were to clarify the bylaws, to organize them, to make it easier to read and be able to follow along with the zoning, to simplify it if possible, so that there's more administrative control into the rules and regulations, and to preserve the zoning board of appeals functions. So with that, the bylaw working group started to expand their area of thought of where it would need some additional work, which turned into Section 3 of the zoning bylaws, which is the table of uses and some of the definitions. Article 14, the administrative functions. Article 15, which became the land use permit section, and Article 16, which is the bigger definition section. So all those became part of the content, and that's the reason why we have so many articles before town meeting this time around. So apologies to town meeting, but it's necessary to get everything worked and coordinated between the different sections of the zoning bylaws.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to be very specific about which one you'd like to address first, because you've just managed to throw them all out there again. And for the public, they don't know what warrant article you're talking about. I'm looking at warrant articles and your descriptors.
Let's start with Article 18.
Article
Take them in
18,
order.
which is
Let's take them in
delete
order.
the zoning bylaws, section 1216.9.
And 1216.9 says that Article 12, which has to do with performance standards, such as landscaping, traffic impacts, and lighting, doesn't apply to special permits. But it doesn't quite make too much sense. If you have the performance standards in there, it applies to all development. Why shouldn't it not apply to special permits? So that has been promoted by the board, the board to be included in the articles that town meeting has to vote on.
Okay, so it's a correction of something that should have been done to be consistent. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Thank you. Next.
Article 19, amend Article 16 definitions. These are definitions that have been requested by the bylaw working group and the building commissioner. There are other articles that have definitions in them, but this is a section that includes a number of definitions that are to be reviewed to help clarify some of the other bylaw sections that are being amended, such as the solar bylaw and the permitting bylaw.
Okay, that was warrant article 19, which amends the zoning bylaws, article 16 of the zoning bylaws. And I think you have explained it. Next, we'll go back and ask questions afterwards, please.
Article
Next.
20, this is an update of section 3 of the zoning bylaw. And as I said before, this is the use table and definitions. And it changes some of the definitions for greater clarity and specificity.
Excellent. That was a great summary. Next.
Article 21, this is Article 14. This is a description of the administrative functions of the land use boards and clarifies enforcement.
Okay, next.
Article 22 is the redraft of section 15. It expands it from just the site plan review process to describe the land use permitting processes in whole, and all the way from pre-application to the length of the permit.
Excellent.
Article is patterned after partnered with a draft rules and regulations that the boards are considering now.
Okay, next.
Article 23 is additions to Article 5. That's the wireless communications. This is a co-location requirement requested by the IT department to assist our emergency services departments by requiring the option for installing municipal equipment on new cell towers being erected in town.
Thank you. And number 20, Article 24, which is amending. Let's go back. Let's hold 24 and 25 for a moment. Do any of my board members have any questions on the clarifications, amendments, updates, and other things, which all have been properly noticed and advertised and heard? Am I correct, Mr. Buckland, or they will have been by the time town meeting comes?
That's right. We have a public hearing coming up next Monday that covers some of the ones that are remaining, but we have all these have gone through public hearing already.
And they already are all on file with the town clerk. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Ms. Wertz, do you have a question?
Yeah, I only have one question and it's on town article 23. So I think
That's
actually
the
the
wireless
last one you
communications. Go
mentioned,
ahead.
the wireless communications one. I may have misread it. I thought the change said that these 60-foot towers could be put in an extensive use area, including residential area, but I need to confirm. I was told that was already in that particular bylaw already, and the only thing being changed is the ability for our service departments, i.e. fire, police, to put additional equipment on those cell towers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes,
Okay.
yippee, short questions and short answers. We're getting there, guys.
Thank you.
Ms. Wertz. Any other questions on any of these so far? Excellent. Now, let's go to sort of the meaty ones, not that the others aren't meaty, but Article 24 and Article 25. I believe that those will require, because this is sort of, go ahead, Ms. Ward, Ms. Quirk or Mr. Buckland. Do you want to?
I think Sherry should take this one at this time. So this is her baby.
Okay, Ms. Quirk.
If it's my baby, but I will talk about it. You all have heard me talk before about battery storage and concerns that the planning board has developed in hearing some pending cases that solar applications that include battery storage. And this proposed bylaw is based on battery storage bylaws that have been adopted by other towns who've worked extensively on the issues and have developed processes that are both site plan review and special permit, like our solar bylaw is, carefully review battery storage projects to make sure that they're properly sited, that they can be operated and maintained safely. As you know, one of the big concerns with battery storage is the possibility of fire due to thermal runaway, not well understood, not yet well understood in terms of why it happens and how to address it in terms of firefighting. So this bylaw is intended to be protective and allow the planning board the flexibility to take actions it deems necessary in order to protect the health, safety, and welfare of our population as we learn more about this technology and as the technology develops more. And I should also say, this will not be what you want to hear tonight. This will not be the last time that we deal with battery storage. It's going to be with us. We're going to have to keep addressing it as the technology develops and as we address the question of standalone battery storage, which the Attorney General has placed before us.
Thank you, Ms. Quirk. Mr. Buckland, did you want to add something?
Yeah, for Article 25, which is Article 5, the solar energy bylaw itself. The draft we have in the warrant includes content that was rejected by the Attorney General, and because this was the article that was actually sitting from last spring. It was waiting for review by the Attorney General, and they kept postponing it, and finally got around to it, and it was too late to change it at this point. So I'm recommending that one be passed over at this time and taken to the Springtown meeting.
So that is Article 25 that you're speaking of, warrant Article 25. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, quickie questions.
I just have a question. Is this 100% word for word what the previously submitted article was?
Has to be.
It is 100% word for word what is in the warrant.
Has to be.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Concerns? Comments? Mr. Buckland, do you have any other things?
Article 27.
Article 27, yep.
When I drafted the stormwater pollution prevention general bylaw in 2017, I put in the Board of Health in charge of stormwater management permits because I put them in charge of the illicit discharge section. They were doing the enforcement, and it became obvious that they should do that. But Patrick McDonald came to me kind of in a panic about how to handle stormwater permits recently, and it just happened. It was just before the closure of the warrant, so we put it in the planning board, which has been the board that's taken on stormwater permits and done it quite well. Makes sense that they continue to do that. So I submitted this article to change the Board of Health to the planning board for stormwater permits.
And I would just note that throughout the whole bylaw, it refers to the planning board, and the Board of Health shows up only once, as I recall, which is what caused Mr. McDonald to have fits, right?
Well, they're in charge of the enforcement of the illicit discharge
Right.
and the inspections that come along with all these
Right, but-
systems.
Okay, but your planning board is in full agreement with this recommendation?
I believe they are.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Does anybody foresee any more questions for Mr. Buckland, or can he take the rest of the evening off?
He can go to sleep.
We'll chase them down if we need them.
Okay, Mr. Buckland and Ms. Quirk, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Let's go back to Mr. Sullivan. Do you have any things that you would like to submit to us so that we could vote on them? Any of the warrant articles, sir?
Yep. Before we get on there, in case I miss it later, I got a contact from a Wareham resident, young gentleman who was worried because I wasn't at the last selectmen's meeting. So I just wanted to say hi to Michael and say, I'm here, Michael. Don't worry. Everything's all set. So you'd be
Haven't
surprised.
ridden off to the sunset? Okay, go ahead, Mr.
all right.
Sullivan.
So have you voted on the PEG access yet?
No, sir.
The amount is $214,999.52.
One more time?
214,999.52.
Thank you. Okay.
We have the first time in a long time. We have Mr. Campina gave us a going away gift. We've got 2 past due bills from the sewer. One is for Flow Assessment Services LLC in the amount of $13,650, 13650.
And what's the name again?
Flow Assessment Services LLC.
Okay.
And the second one is of the Onset Water Department, $945.
How much?
$945.
Thank you. Okay.
Let's see.
Can
Articles 1 and 2,
Yeah.
capital, and the transfers we will be passing over. I'm still uncertain whether we'll have free cash in time, and I would rather push it to the spring special.
Okay. The union contracts we can't do because we're going into executive session tonight for a couple more.
We have the Eversource that the
Agreement.
Yeah.
Yep, and Star. Yep.
So that's it's simple. That's the Hammond School site. I'll see if I can try and got a million things here, but let's see if I can share. this.
You had given us, or I've seen it.
You've seen the copy. I've sent it to you.
Yeah.
before? Okay.
Yep.
So that one, and I think I'm trying to think of any others that are under my purview.
The number 13, Article 13.
Title, please. I'm sorry, I don't know by number.
That's delete the lottery requirements.
Correct. Yeah, I know that come a few years ago. After the last town meeting, the spring, not the summer, a couple residents, couple board members, not from you, but from finance committee and such, talked about how it's a little confusing, the setup now with the lottery, because you have a lot of times, if you have the large booklet, you're flipping back and forth and it's hard to organize yourself. I know for myself, it's pretty difficult. You have everything laid out, you're just jumping back and forth. So I thought it'd be well worth it to bring it back. The lottery, when we had a quorum of 150 to act on any financial matters. I don't know if all of you remember, we would have to pause the meeting. People would be calling friends, neighbors, loved ones to come to the meeting because we couldn't act on budgetary items.
Right.
So it went to the zero quorum, which was in the lottery was built in there. How did that help? Well, that helped if there was people that came for a specific item. Let's say it was something to deal with the neighborhood, or so. What you saw was as soon as that article went, those people would disappear. And you also had some gamesmanship where if somebody didn't like the next vote, they'd then call for a quorum count to try and see if they could basically undo it. So I think you have a lot cleaner system now with the zero quorum, and going along with that, I don't believe there's a requirement for the lottery. I don't think it makes as much sense as it did in the past.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Slavin, you have your hand up.
Just a curiosity, Derek, has the monies coming from the cable companies for WCTV in the town, has that dropped somewhat?
Yes.
Yeah, there's one. I think there still needs to be an agreement worked out with. I don't know. I can't remember. I believe it's Verizon.
It's the Verizon contract has not yet been finalized.
Yeah. So.
But yes, the revenues are declining, Mr. Slavin.
Thank you.
Yeah, the expectation is they will decline as streaming comes in. There's a legislation to a lot of the community TV channels are putting forward to try and tax streaming services for PEG access as well. So
I can speak briefly to Article 6, which is the Harbor Services Permit Receipts Reserved for Appropriation. It's $5,000 to be transferred to the Harbor Master's Maintenance and Improvement account. It's a rah-rah account. Next year, there will be one article with two delineations. So the next article is the same source of funds, but it's for $58,750. And that's to pay for that, more of the paying for that boat. And the amendment to the waterways rules, number 8, where you remember that there was a very lengthy and really interesting article submitted by the harbor master, which was approved, except for a few little things. And Article 8 fixes those little things that were bounced by the Attorney General's office. So it'll clean up the entire document, and it will pass muster all the way around. We've already discussed and voted on Articles 9 through 12. We just did 13 and we did 14. The elected constable article I will speak to.
Judith, we didn't vote on those. We heard them, but we didn't vote.
I have that we voted.
Well, we had a whole bunch we went through, and remember I emailed you afterwards and said, aren't we going to vote on these?
I'll double check that.
Yeah.
Because I went back and looked. I
Okay.
think we voted on one on 9 through 12 in the Saturday hours. I'm pretty sure we voted on those 5. The elected constables, we currently have either 9 or 10 appointed constables. Many years ago, all constables were elected. We get quarterly reports from the remittances. The appointed constables have to follow all of our rules and regulations in terms of knowing the open meeting law and passing the ethics course, as well as other documentation. Elected constables do not have to do that. We have one elected constable. If this article were to pass, she would fill out the remaining term, and then she would have to apply to be an appointed constable. Road commissioners, Mr. Slavin, do you choose to speak on that one?
No.
Did you say no?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward.
What are the reasons that you would recommend it?
We basically brought that forward due to the actual makeup of the committee. Certain members expressing that the time that was involved was difficult with the regular position they had in town, etc. And it probably would be easier for the selectmen to take it back and have instant access to town council when questions come up legally. Answers could be done in a day or so instead of weeks.
Thank you. Any other ones that we haven't touched on briefly?
No.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to say I got input from Norma. She watched the video. We voted on 9 through 12 and 17.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay,
sounds-
so we would need a motion on 3 through, well, let's do, I guess we could do one, we could have one motion for 3 through 8, unless any one of you has questions or concerns about any one of those. You've been given figures by Mr. Sullivan for the PEG access as well as the prior bills. Union contracts, we would not be voting on Article 5 right now. So you would have to skip that, Ms. Wertz, in your motion.
Okay. Make a motion that we recommend Articles 3 for prior year bills, 4 for the PEG access, 6 for the harbor service permit receipts for software, 7 for the harbor service permit receipts for debt payment, and 8, the amendment to the waterway rules.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second,
Motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion on those motions? These are to recommend favorable action to the town meeting. Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Mr. Slavin,
yes,
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself. Yes, thank you very much. Ms. Wertz, let's go to 13 through 16.
okay, I make a
Unless, does
motion.
anybody have any questions, any further questions or comments about 13 through 16? Hearing none, go ahead, Ms. Wertz, sorry.
I make a motion that we recommend Article 13, delete the lottery requirement from art meeting articles. 14, easement agreement with N-Star Eversource. You said 15, elected, the elected constable article, and 16, the road commissioners.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to recommend favorable action on those articles. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Mr. Slavin,
yes,
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself, yes, thank you. Okay, Ms. Wertz, let's do, are you comfortable in doing 18 through 24?
yeah, I think we can do that.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation for Article 18, delete zoning bylaws section 1216.9, Article 19, amend zoning bylaws for Article 16, Article 20, update zoning bylaws, Article 3, use table, Article 21, zoning bylaws, Article 14, clarification, Article 22, clarification of zoning bylaws, Article 15, land use, Article 23, amend zoning bylaws, Articles 3 and 5, wireless communications, and Article 24, amend zoning bylaws, Article 5 for large solar batteries.
There's a second to that motion.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Mr. Slavin,
yes,
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself. Okay, Ms. Wertz, I'm going to ask you to make a motion to pass over Articles 1, 2, and 25. 1 and 2 are the capital plan, and then the transfer of available funds, and then Article 25, which you heard the planning department would.
so say that again, which ones are we passing
1,
over?
2, and 25 to pass over, please.
Make a motion to pass over Articles 1, approve and fund FY 23 capital plan, 2, transfer of available funds, and 25, which is amend zoning bylaws, section 590, solar energy.
Is there a
Second.
second to that motion? Motion made and seconded to, excuse me, pass over those 3 articles. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Mr. Slavin,
yes,
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself, yes. Okay, 20. Let's try 27, which is the bylaw correction on the stormwater permit that Mr. Buckland just gave to you. May I have a motion?
make a motion for a favorable recommendation for Article 27 bylaw correction for stormwater permit.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to recommend favorable action. Any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Mr. Slavin,
Yes.
Ms. Wertz,
Yes,
and myself. Okay, yes, 400 and 26, which is the construction costs for the clarifier and headworks upgrades. May I have a motion, Ms. Wertz?
make a motion for a favorable recommendation for Article 26, construction cost for the WPCF projects, clarifier and headworks upgrades.
Is there a second to that motion? Is there a second to that motion? I will second the motion. Excuse me, is there any further discussion on the motion to recommend favorable action? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Mr. Bessie,
No.
Mr. Slavin,
I'm gonna pass,
you mean abstain?
whatever word you would like to use.
Okay, no. Okay, and Ms. Wertz?
Yes,
And myself, yes, so it's 2-0-2-1-1. So it doesn't pass as, I mean, our recommendation is a split recommendation.
Yeah.
I'll bring that back next week when we have Mr. Chadwick here with us, if you don't mind. And then number 28, Ms. Wertz, we heard from the petitioner on the accept candle paper lane.
I make a,
If there's a whole lot of confusion about that one, I don't mind holding it off for a week, but if Mr. Slavin, yes?
That was actually approved. 2-1-1 is an approval.
I'm sorry?
2-1-1 is basically
on
approved
26.
on 26. That's a yes overall.
No, it isn't.
Sure it is. Two for, one against, one abstained. You've got 3 votes technically. It's
No, you don't.
sure you do.
No, you have 2, Mr. Bowen. Is a 2-1-1 a prevailing vote? No.
Wait till he mutes himself.
Freckles. Okay, we'll
Freckles
come
is
back
sitting
to
on,
him.
Freckles is sitting on the microphone.
Mr. Bowen.
That freckles is tough. So you've got 2 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 person abstaining. Abstaining means to not vote. So you have a 2-1 vote that passed.
Okay, but our recommendation is going to be recorded as 2-1-1. Because it's a favorable
Yes.
recommendation.
A faintly favorable recommendation, but yes, faint.
Okay, fine.
Favorable.
Thank you very much.
I was right again.
Oh, right. Okay, let's try Article 28, Ms. Wertz, which is the candle paper lane. Does anybody want to hold that one off for a week?
I was,
Go ahead,
Go.
Tricia, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I
Ms.
was
Wertz.
even looking how it was written, and it was written that it's the select board's article, and I have confusion on how it's even written.
It's not a selectman's article, it's a petitioned article that we have to put in by right because it was
I understand that,
Oh, okay.
but
Go ahead.
so we have to put in her exact wording, correct? Even though it says it's a select board's article.
What page are you on?
I gotta get way back to the back of
Yeah, I
it.
know.
Candle paper lane, right?
Yep.
Yeah, what's the number again? Yeah,
it's-
accept candle paper lane, petitioned article to see if the town will vote to accept the select board's layout of candle paper lane as a public way as petitioned by abutters or take any action relative thereto.
Okay, I see what your question is. It
Yeah.
is a petitioned article from the petitioners only. It had to go into the warrant by right because it was properly petitioned. But we can choose not to recommend it, if that's your question.
No, but the question is, it says it's the select board's layout.
It is the select
is?
board's layout. That's the
Okay.
way that it has to be presented to town meeting.
Presented, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Slavin.
Because of the legality of how it has to work and everything else, I would suggest, as much as I feel bad for the people of Candle Paper Lane, that we should put this out for further study to see if they're going to basically move forward and take care of the 4 conditions so we can actually go through and make a decision on this that's legitimate. Right now, our hands are tied. So
Was
I would
that-
suggest further study.
So was that a motion?
Yes, dear.
A second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on the recommendation for further study? Hearing none, I will go for a roll call vote. Put your hand down, Mr. Slavin. Mr. Bessie,
Yes.
Mr. Slavin,
Yes.
Schwartz. For further
I'm gonna abstain.
Okay. And myself, yes, so 301 words, okay. Excellent, I think we did everything that we could, am I correct?
Have we done the gift of the bench one?
We haven't heard from it yet.
We haven't heard, so we
We're gonna
still have
hear
to hear from
29,
her.
30, and 31
31,
next week.
yeah, okay.
So I believe we've done everything else, is that correct? Yes, we have.
It looks like it.
Yep, looks like it, okay.
We didn't talk about, let me see, I think it's done. I think they're previously done.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're good,
done
we're
them all.
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Town administrator's report. We cut you off. You had 2 minutes and now you can have a few more.
No, you gave me the gist of everything that needed to be on there.
So you're all set? Okay, excellent. Liaison initiative reports, Mr. Bessie?
We already did that.
Yes, we did.
We moved it up front.
Somebody's paying attention. We have no minutes, so I'm going to accept a motion to go into executive session for reason number 3. And in order for us to do that, we're going to, after you make the motion, we will go into executive session and we will adjourn from executive session. And we will be taking a 5-minute recess to clear the audience. Motion made to go.
Second.
Thank you very much. For the record, it's to discuss 2 union contracts under Mass General Law, Section 30A, Chapter 30A, Section 21(3), reason to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. And this chair declares that it would. So we are now going to go into, oh, I got to take a vote, right?
Well,
Mr.
Madam
Beth?
Chair, it's the sergeants and the lieutenants union.
Yes, I'm sorry. The Sergeants Union, NEPA, Local 181, and the Superior Officers, Local 180. Right, okay. There's a motion and a second to go into executive session. May I have a roll call vote. Mr. Bessie?
Yes.
Mr. Slavin?
Sure.
Ms. Wertz?
Yes.
Myself, yes. We will come back at 9:17. And we will be dismissed or we will adjourn from that. So please take 5 minutes, Mr. Sullivan, as in Noah Sullivan, please clear the audience out. Thank you very much.